Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today or for tuning in later. My name is Chuck Minguez. I'm the SDR here at One to One. We are super excited to have Natalie Soares from ConnectWise today to talk about the role of IT consulting in digital transformation. Natalie, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you for joining us
Awesome.
today. Before we jump in, would you be able to give the folks who are tuning in just a little bit information about your background?
Of course. So this is my big face right here. So thank you for having me. So I guess the most important stuff is I only admit to about 25 years of experience. It might be a little more, but we're going to go with 25.
25 is
I
a good
began
number.
my career. I began my career as a software developer and really have worked with intelligence analysts my entire career. And really, the most important thing on this is I would say that I'm really passionate about my family, threat intelligence, and Lego. And, the order varies day to day, but,
Very nice. When you say
yeah.
Lego, you mean like Lego as in the
Oh,
bricks, the
yeah.
toys. Very
Oh,
nice.
yeah, definitely. Toys.
I
Those are
love it.
collectibles.
Well, thank you
So,
so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
no problem. Yeah, let's jump right into this. So, today I just want to give them a heads up. This is what our agenda is going to look like. Of course, we got to begin with some definitions when we're educating. So, we'll talk about, what does cybersecurity mean? What's happening in the cyber landscape? What does this mean as a SMB or small to mid-sized business? What should we do about all this information? Then we're going to have an intermission. That'll be a surprise. And then, okay, now we've talked about what you should do. How should we do it? And then that's when we'll get into the really fun part of this.
Great.
So let's start with a little definition and let's have some fun. And you can't cheat, Chuck, because you know the answer to this. So this is one of my favorite all-time movies. Of course, this gives me some nerd cred, right?
Yes.
Cybersecurity, you keep using that word, but that doesn't mean necessarily what we think it means, does it? And, one of my favorite actors, Mandy Patinkin, it's so funny to me,
Nice.
that he was such a serious actor and then he'd play a part like Inigo Montoya in The
Right.
Princess
Yeah.
Bride, right? But I guess we have to be serious here a little at least. So, what is cybersecurity really about? It's really all about managing your risk. And, we understand as SMBs that security is a cost center. So, the only way that it's going to make sense to you as an SMB is if you're going to do something with your cybersecurity to reduce that business risk or save you some money, right?
Right.
And actually, otherwise, why would you care as an SMB, right? And let me tell you why you would care. We have some different little challenges. So, in our day to day, we get to talk to a lot of SMBs, right, Chuck?
Right.
And what are
Exactly.
some,
Yeah.
yeah. So, what are some of the things they tell us? Well, first of all, they may not tell us this first one, but a lot of times they think it's all about the IT. And, tech people like me, we love the IT, right? But it really is a business challenge. It's all about, what are your business objectives? And then again, that risk, what is your risk tolerance? And that's how we decide what we do to protect your environment, right? It's not,
Hmm.
I mean, of course, has an IT aspect, but it's not an IT challenge, right?
Right. Yep.
And just like us, I know that we here at ConnectWise dealt with this, and I'm sure you did at One to One, the remote workforce, right?
Yep.
That, really expands our threat surface. So we got to think about those remote workers who aren't necessarily behind that firewall, or, maybe they're
Yep.
using their own devices versus using corporate owned devices, right?
Right. Yeah, it's a great
You
point
know?
and something that comes up in conversation pretty much on a
Yeah.
daily basis. Yep.
And then, cybersecurity is really a specialized skill set. I certainly didn't start in cybersecurity. I started, just as a software developer in IT. And, it's really a very specialized skill set. And it really is something that not every organization has the privilege to have someone on their staff who understands cyber, right?
Right.
And again, The next one, maybe they don't have a written incident response plan or a business continuity and disaster recovery plan. And, in the midst of an issue is not where you want to be
Yeah,
writing
not
those
a good time to be
documents.
writing that. No.
No, not at all a good time. And unfortunately, inflation, right? Everything costs more these days. Doesn't matter if it's your milk, your eggs, or your cyber incident, right?
Right. Yep.
So, your cyber incident. And then another really interesting thing is the whole global legislation. And I know we don't have a global audience here, but, think about it. Maybe you're more global than you think you are, because the thing that these laws have in common, whether they're across the pond at the UK or they're here in some other state in the US, they're based on where your client's located, not where you're
Right.
located.
Yep. That's a great
So,
point.
yeah, we have to pay attention to that stuff. And me coming from that DoD background, that's the Department of Defense, I'm always intrigued by this whole cyber warfare thing for a couple of reasons. One, we actually saw ransomware decline initially when the Ukraine and Russia entered their conflict.
Huh.
Unfortunately for us, it's spiked right back up now.
Right. Yeah.
They got it under control now. They're multitasking great. Right? But not just that. What happens when these conflicts are over? In kinetic warfare, you're going to take away the tanks, you're going to take away the weapons, you're going to take away the supplies. What are we going to do? Take away their keyboards? Probably not.
Right. Yep. Yep.
They're going to have to do something when that war is over. And as you're going to see from some of the stats I'm going to share, they're financially driven. So I can assure you, once they're not concentrating on cyber warfare, they're going to concentrate on us, all of us,
Yep.
even more, right?
Yep.
And honestly, as a small business, please don't discount the reputation damage, because, you hear about the big boys all the time getting hacked. Target,
Yep.
Home Depot, Lowe's, Amazon, on and on and on. And, they have a lot of staying power that as an SMB, we don't necessarily have.
Right.
Um, you know, and
That's
there's
another.
competition in the market.
Yep.
So,
Another piece that comes up often is talking about that reputation, especially in the SMB space. Yeah. Very important topic.
yep. And then I always get asked, are bad guys really interested in my data?
And that's the
And
question that comes up. Exactly.
and
Yep.
the answer is yes. It used to be back in the good old days, 25 or so years ago, right? That enterprises were the target. And they were the target because they were the target of opportunity, because they had the big
Right.
bucks. Because like I said, these guys want to make some money, right? They're looking
Yep.
for a payday. Guess what? Look at that stat in red. And this comes from the University of Maryland. It's not a for-profit company, right?
Yep.
They have
Yep.
no skin in the game by telling you that 82% of ransomware attacks target SMBs. And I like to say the real question is not, is my data valuable to the attackers? The real question is the data available or valuable to you? How long can you remain in business without access to your client info or your secret sauce, before you have an issue?
Yep.
Because let me tell you, if an incident happens, and I'm not even talking a full-fledged breach, so I think I should take a moment here. So there's a difference between an event/attack, an incident, or a breach. So an event or an attack, that could be something as simple as we see a lot of here in the Security Operations Center is port scanning. Bad guys just looking, knocking at the door, seeing if they can get in. So that would be an event or attack. An incident is you click on a phishing email and you just gave access to your Office 365 account to somebody. And so that has to do with what we call the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, or availability is compromised, right? And
Right.
then a breach is when they actually take your data or encrypt your data or publish your data somewhere and it's available to people it shouldn't be available to, or maybe they accessed a piece of data. Maybe you're under HIPAA compliance or some PCI compliance, and they've caused you to fail at that compliance, right? That's a
Right.
breach. And super important to note that incident and breach are legal terms and they should not be used lightly. So, yeah. So, and another thing, Verizon, I like to use stats from Verizon because most people know who Verizon is. They may not know that Verizon creates this data breach investigations report, but it is an annual report. This is the 2023 report, only because the 2024 report won't be released for a few more months. And this is actually 2022 data, but as you can see, Verizon has a lot of experience, almost 1 million incidents analyzed, and over a quarter of those were confirmed breaches. And how are these bad guys getting in? Credentials, and we'll come back to that in a little bit. Phishing, we all know what phishing is. We tend to think phishing is so big, but if you look at it compared to credentials, it is big because
Sure.
it's, but it's not, because it can cause a lot of damage, right? But it's really the credentials was where it's at. And I promise you I'll come back to that. Exploit vulnerabilities, in case you don't know what that is. Software developers, we like to think we're like so smart that we create this great software. It has no errors in it. Well, sometimes there are errors, and those are considered vulnerabilities, or sometimes something new out of the software developer's control happens, right? And we get what we call an exploit vulnerability. And guess what? There are bad guys actively looking for this. Sometimes you'll hear the term 0 day. Yeah. So 0 day just means the first time something was discovered, a bad thing was discovered. And those are usually due to exploiting vulnerabilities that are newly discovered. So a little bit more into how these bad guys act, because I think it's really important for you to understand how you could protect yourself. So again, back in the dark ages, when I started, right, these bad guys had to be software developers themselves. They had to understand network protocols and how networks worked, and unfortunately for us, now that we have this whole production line of organized crime, these guys have set up full enterprises themselves. So not being a software developer and not understanding networks, that is no longer a barrier to being a threat actor, because they have these affiliate programs. Isn't that cute?
It's completely wild that's even a thing, but yeah.
I know. So I'm a Lockbit affiliate. Well, not me personally, please. But all you need to be an affiliate of a threat actor like Lockbit is to have some cryptocurrency and access to the dark web. And oh, by the way, anyone on this call, even if you're not technical, I'm telling you, just do a Google search of how to access the dark web. Super simple. You'll figure it out in no time, right? That's about all I'm going to give away on this call. And they have help desks, they have call centers, they have payment processing centers. They're a full enterprise, and they'll just share in the profits from whoever buys their services. And honestly, one of the things to note is really, even if you are ransomed, there's a couple of things. It's more than a ransom. Your chances of getting your data back, even if you pay, are very slim. Only 4% of people who experience a ransomware incident get all of their data back.
Wow, that's a powerful stat.
Yeah, about most people get about 61% of their data back. But you don't get to choose which 60. So, that unfortunately is not good. And it's more than the ransom. They do what we call quadruple extortion. There was actually some information in the news recently about quadruple extortion for a recent attack, where not only did the bad guys ask for a ransom from you, they'll ask for a ransom from your clients not to release their data, even threatening your clients. And don't tell me that's not going to damage your reputation.
I was just going to say that reputational damage is at that point is going to be pretty harsh.
Oh, yeah. And they're also doing what we call a DDoS, distributed denial of service attack. And in layman's terms, that just means making your resources unavailable to you. Excuse me, making your website maybe unavailable to your clients, or something like that. Sorry there, I got a frog in my throat.
No worries.
So what I'm showing here is some of the attacks that are happening in your local area, as well as nationally. Look, Lehigh Valley is being attacked by a Russian ransomware gang. Can you believe that? That's Allentown, Pennsylvania.
That's Yep.
So yeah, they are interested in you.
Yep.
Some Pennsylvania courts were interrupted, and I think this happened. This may have happened in 2023 or even 2022, but they're still suffering the ramifications of this in 2024, right? Law firms. There are ransomware attacks that are targeting law firms. Not only are people able to be, those little affiliates of the bad guys, this stuff all happens automatically. They're
Yep.
not sitting down in there. I mean, I'm sure there's still somebody sitting in a basement somewhere with a keyboard, right? But that's not the norm anymore. What's happening is all of this stuff is actually automated. So they'll do what we call a pray and spray. So they can very easily hit a bunch of small businesses at the same time and just see where they can break in. Just keep knocking on doors until they find an opening. So remember, I told you I'd come back to credentials. Well, I'm going to come back to credentials on this slide. So you may notice here, I have a couple of articles here, one on OpenAI or ChatGPT and one on Facebook. Large organizations. Why as an SMB would you care about these organizations? Well, unfortunately, a lot of times people will use their work email and the same password that they use to log into your network infrastructure to access their social media. It could be Facebook, it could be ChatGPT, Instagram, LinkedIn. That's a huge one, right?
Yep.
They've also had issues as well. There was a while where there was a lot of LinkedIn takeovers of accounts. So please, for goodness sake, put multi-factor authentication on your LinkedIn account, please.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, and if you want to reach out to Chuck if you want more
Yeah,
information
I was going
on
to say
get
I'd
that
be
set
happy to
up.
share some information on that.
Yeah, definitely. Did you see here that Maryland is reported as the third highest risk for a cyber attack? That's crazy.
Right in our backyard.
Yeah, and I think I had another article that said the third was actually Pennsylvania. So I guess it
Oh,
just depends
wow.
on your source. They don't always agree with one another. But this is a reputable source that I grabbed this from. And I do have these links in here, Chuck. So if you wanted to share the actual story with
Okay.
any of your clients or prospects, feel free to share this with them. Because I do like
Perfect.
to make sure that I'm not just sharing pretty pictures with you guys, that I'm sharing
Sure.
worthwhile information. This little article up here in the upper right, the cybercrime, this is just, again, a reputable source that's showing you that I'm not making up that whole ransomware as a service thing, that there are
Sure.
actually reports about it. And then this one in the middle, this is my favorite one. So is everyone familiar with deep fakes, whether they're audio or video deep fakes? And this actually has some play into Facebook as well, believe it or not. Don't
Oh,
answer those
wow.
quizzes on
Yeah.
Facebook.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
don't do those games that say, hey, do you want to see what you're going to look like when you're 80 years old? Because you're giving away your image that could then show up in a deep fake somewhere later.
Yep. Yeah. Which is,
And there's been real news like Tom Hanks was being used by I don't know if you saw that article. Tom Hanks was
yeah.
being used by a dental company and he had to come out and say, this is not really me.
Yeah.
This is a deep fake of me.
Yeah. Which is
That's
scary.
just crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
but what I like to talk about here is it could be a fake girl, it could be a fake guy, it doesn't matter. But they're using this to actually have chats with people. So one term is pig butchering, and pig butchering is when you think you've developed a relationship with somebody and they're not really a real person. I mean, there may be some involvement for real people, but they're fake profiles. It may be some real chats, maybe some AI generated chats, right? But what happens is they target both elderly and business leaders.
Mm.
The elderly, because they might be lonely, maybe they've lost their spouse or their significant other, so they're reaching out for a love connection. The
Sure.
business leader, the way they get the business leader is what this ends up being is this really great investment opportunity, a way to make a lot of money. And hey, business leader, you're a smart business leader, I'm starting to invest in this, what do you think about it? And then they milk you dry. Or with the romantic side, hey,
Yep.
that's where the pig butchering comes in, is this whole romantic side, is you think you've developed this relationship and they will completely build you dry. It's a very elaborate scheme where they'll have information that shows how well these these investments are doing, and you don't realize that what's happened until it's too late and you've lost a lot of money or all your money. So it's really terrible. So those are some of the things so some of the up and coming stuff, because, when it comes to AI, AI is to now what the internet was to the 90s. It's really a disruptor. And with anything, there are always, there's a favorite quote of mine about this. There are three sides to every story,
Yep.
my side, your side, and the truth somewhere in the middle, right?
Yeah.
And, that's how it is with AI. It can be used for good. It can be used for bad, right? And, one of the things I wanted to talk about here with AI is, pig butchering is a way it can be used for bad, or those fake profiles. Harvesting your data from your LinkedIn or your social media and using that to guess your passwords is a way. And when Facebook or ChatGPT is breached, your passwords end up in a database, and that's how they're getting your credentials. Your credentials is simply a combination of your username and password. And if those are breached and you're using those same credentials elsewhere, they're going to use automated means to try to break into your LinkedIn, to try to break into your Office 365 or whatever. And I don't know about you, Chuck, but someone tells me I can't do something, what do you want to do, Chuck? If someone says, do not use AI or ChatGPT, makes me want to do it.
Exactly.
And honestly, it's a really great tool. You just have to be careful, right? I would really not recommend that you out and out ban it, because people are going to find a way. Unless you're going to physically take their phone away from them, they're going to find a way, right? So, just, have guidelines for responsible use. Don't give away proprietary data. That actually happened to Samsung. Don't assume that anything the AI gives you is the truth, is a fact, for a couple of reasons. One reason is that, where is this large language model getting all this data from? The internet.
The internet. Yeah.
And of course, the internet's all full of facts, right?
Everything's true on the internet.
Yes, if you find it on the internet, it is true. But even beyond that, we could have a whole webinar on AI, honestly. AI is prone to something we call hallucinations, where it will just out and out give you bad information, right? There was a case not too long ago, well, it might be a year now, where a lawyer stated case law that was made up by the AI he was using, and got in a lot of trouble with the court system. The judge was not impressed. If you're using it to generate code, that should always be checked. I mean, any code you're generating as a human should be checked. So of course, if you're generating it with AI, it should be checked. And I just mean any scripts. I don't mean like a full-blown, writing a program. I mean, any like little scripts you might be using in your day-to-day activities. And again, educate as part of your policy, education on how you should fact check versus just accepting everything off the internet as true, right? Sometimes we want to have an over-reliance on technology, like something like, ChatGPT. So now that I've told you about how things should go terribly wrong, what should you do about it? Well, there is things you can do about it. Remember at the very beginning when I said it's not just a technology problem? Really, I like to think of this as a three-legged stool: people, process, and technology. And they're all very important when it comes to your cyber defenses, right? What happens to a three-legged stool if one leg is shorter or missing altogether, right? That stool's going to fall over. The same thing is going to happen with cybersecurity. I think we're all familiar, have heard, unfortunately, this still happens where there's financial fraud. The CFO gets an email from the CEO who's on vacation, right? And it really doesn't matter if someone's spoofing that CEO's email, or if the CEO themselves was breached and it really is coming from them. What happens is the CFO will get this email that will say, hey, I'm about to not be reachable. Don't try to call me. Don't email me. But we have this vendor, or we have this client that we owe money, and this money needs to be sent like now. And oh, by the way, the ACH information has changed, right? Or the wire transfer information has changed. And that CFO sends that money. Well, why? And it turns out to be fraud. You really just sent money to a bad guy, right?
Right.
And sometimes these amounts are quite large. They're, in one case that I've heard of, it was actually a piece of equipment that they'd actually been talking about. And the CFO didn't think about it, bought the equipment. The CEO comes back, is like, what the heck? But they didn't really buy equipment, right? They just stuffed the pockets of a bad guy. And why does stuff like this happen? Well, one, the people aspect is missing. That CFO was not trained, perhaps, to look out for phishing emails or to be suspicious of that kind of email, that he should probably pick up the phone anyway. And if he can't get hold of the CEO, maybe another business leader, or maybe even call the vendor or the customer directly himself
Just to get
or
some
herself.
verification. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And not at any phone number that's in that email, but in a good phone number that he or she knows to be a way to get in contact, right?
Right. Yep.
Which brings us into the process part. There should be a process for changing wire transfer, ACH information, or even sending a large amount of money in any situation, right? I mean, he sure had the tech, right? Because that money's gone.
Yep.
But that's just one example, of why that's so important. I mean, there's millions of examples, but these are the capacity outcomes. So this is a good reference to show what happens if you're missing any of these key, these key processes, right?
Yep. Yeah, it's a great chart.
I know, very simple. Another way is building a layered defense. We call this defense in depth, right? You have to have these things to be protected. And the reason why is there's not any one silver bullet in security, unfortunately. I mean, we've all tried to find it. It's kind of like the fountain of youth. It's ever elusive, right?
Yep.
It takes a combination because, there are threats that can bypass your security awareness training because people are busy and they click on something they shouldn't have. But, if you have a good culture of cybersecurity because you're doing great cyber awareness training and someone is busy and they accidentally click on something, they're going to report that to you. So you're going to be able to stop something bad from happening by mitigating that threat,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
There are, under access management, there are threats out there that could defeat MFA, but your security information event management system, your SIM, could catch that, or your EDR could catch those, your endpoint detection and response. So that's why you have to have these multiple layers. And then, the other thing is, think about this. We have to get it right every single time to keep the bad guy out, right? How many times do they need to get it right?
Yeah. Yep.
Once. So you have to have multiple layers. And that's why you have to have your incident response plan and your business continuity and disaster recovery, which includes your backup, but it also includes that written component as well. So you just have to have those things, right? And let's look at this. And oh, by the way, the things you see on here, if you want reputable, affordable, and comprehensive cyber insurance, you will have all of this. Now, if you only need two of those three, or one of those three, you're good to go. But if you want all three of those, you do have to have this. And some of this stuff is really newly appearing in some of these applications for cyber insurance, like the access management, perhaps not the multi-factor authentication, but like the identity access management, the privilege access management. I know I'm throwing out a lot of terms there, but we got to get to the fun part. Things like this here, computer updates. Yeah, computer updates are part of your cyber plan, right? Updates are going to save you from vulnerabilities, right?
Yep.
Again, encrypting data at rest, encrypting data in communication. And I know we all long for the good old days when the only things on this list were firewall and antivirus, right? But unfortunately,
such a simpler time.
I know, but unfortunately, or really fortunately, as bad guys have gotten smarter, so have we. We're using these things to defend you. So, well, why don't we take a little intermission here? I know everyone's been dying for this intermission. I feel like we should have set up some music for this, but maybe next time. So the intermission is, a quiz, goody. So, I'm just going to give like a couple seconds here so people can think about this, and then we'll talk about the answer. And if you guys want to answer in the Q&A, that would be great. Unfortunately, that won't be part of the recording, so we will go over the answer too. So I know some people weren't able to make it, so those who weren't able to make it will get the benefit of the discussion. So what percentage of cyber attacks are conducted against North America? And we have a few choices here. Some of the numbers are pretty high, some are pretty low. But it feels like forever when you're on this end waiting, right? So I'm going to move on. So actually, North America, 70 over 70% of cyber attacks are actually someone in North America is the target. Of course, this includes the United States, Canada, Mexico, all of us here in North America. Unfortunately, I couldn't break it down just to the US because I would bet a huge percentage of that is US, probably
Sure.
closely followed by Canada. And this does come from that Verizon report I shared with you earlier.
And I'm
Another
sorry, Natalie,
interesting,
a quick
yeah,
question real quick. So
sure.
out of that 70%, I mean, a good chunk of that is the SMBs, correct?
Oh, yes,
Compared to
yes.
like the larger players, like you were saying earlier. So even
Yeah.
though you might be thinking that, well, I don't have to worry about it, because they're going after those targets and things like that, but you do have to worry about it.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our earlier stat, 83% or 82%, I can't remember if it's 82 or 83, of ransomware actually targets SMBs. There are whole threat actor, what I call gangs, because they are criminal gangs, that their bread and butter is the
It's
SMB
focusing
market.
on
You
the
are their target.
SMBs. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And so this is an interesting corollary here. So what percentage of the world's internet usage do you think comes from North America? I think this is going to be surprising. I probably just gave
I
away
think
the
this is
answer.
surprising. Yeah.
6.5%. Is responsible for over half of the internet usage. Now, the data person in me, the software developer, wants to go back and do a little more digging into these stats because they did come from two different reports. They weren't broken down quite the same way, but I think there's such a difference in numbers. I think it's very eye-opening
Yeah.
that we actually are not responsible for most of the usage of the internet, yet we are responsible for most of the
Or the
victimization.
victimization. Yeah, that's some pretty wild stats.
Yeah. So, this stat here, this honestly, this is a direct corollary to those credentials, why credentials are such a big way that bad guys are getting into your environments is that reuse of credentials. And I mean, that's part of the human element is reuse of credentials. So password managers are a good way to mitigate that. Multi-factor authentication is a good way to help with this. And really, those are actually technologies that actually help you in the long run, believe it or not. When they're used properly and you know how to use them, they actually make your life easier. So those really can simplify your business processes, believe it or not. And I'm happy to argue about that with anyone. Because just like credentials are the number one way bad guys are getting in, 74% is caused by human error. It could be error, privilege misuse, and privilege misuse does not necessarily mean insider threat. Privilege misuse can mean I have my regular login credentials as a regular user on my laptop, but I also have admin credentials because there's certain things I need to do as an admin, like specialized software I may need to install, right?
That's a
Um,
great call out. Yep.
yeah, so someone using admin credentials every day on their work laptop is super not good.
Yep.
Super
Yep.
not good. And actually, as high as that is, we're doing better. The previous year, the report was 82%. 83% of breaches are external actors. Just like I said earlier, 95% of breaches, the goal is to make money.
Yep.
So the goal isn't where there are breaches that are caused because, maybe you're part of the Department of Defense supply chain and an activist group is coming after you. That does happen, right?
Yep.
But it's not as prolific as just straight financial motivation. And then this is the last one. So what do you think your data is worth? And this is really a big one. And I think it's really surprising which one is C, only $1. And I think it's also surprising to me which one is between 2 to 4K, right? And if you really want to be shocked and awed, go and Google what an infant social security number is going for on the dark web. Because
Wow.
again, back in the dark ages, our infants didn't get social security numbers at birth. We didn't
Yep.
get social security numbers. I didn't get one until I was ready to drive,
Yep.
right? And begin working as a 15, 16-year-old, right?
Yep.
And now they're issued at birth for whatever reason. A piece of personal advice here, lock your children's credit report. Lock it. because you
piece of
don't want to
advice.
find out,
Yeah.
when they're 15, 16, or 18, that someone has stolen their identity or stolen their social and is using it.
Yep.
Right. So our social security numbers, however, are only worth about $1,
Hmm.
which I find surprising.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising to me as well.
And and there's references here. I think maybe some of that has to do with the fact that some of the credit reporting agencies themselves have been breached, and this information is so readily
Yeah, that's
available that it's just lost its value, right?
Yep,
Supply and
great
demand.
point. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yep.
Right. And then look at this. Access to the corporate network is only worth about 2 to 4K. And that's a double-edged sword there. That's both good and bad, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
Yep.
the reason it's bad is because, hey, if I'm just playing around and I've accessed the dark web and I just want to see that's not an awful lot of money for someone who's not a serious threat actor to just wreak a lot of havoc in your corporation, right?
Yep.
So that's really scary. Healthcare data worth a lot. There are a lot of breaches against healthcare. Your full credit card details. I think those aren't worth so much anymore because really the credit card companies have gotten pretty good at detecting fraudulent use.
Yep.
Right? Because they're taking advantage of machine learning and AI just like the rest of us techie people, right?
Yep.
So, it makes it easier to detect that. I mean, they're far from perfect, right?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
they're a lot better.
We're getting way better. Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think this is such a great slide too, because it's essentially showing what does a shopping list look like for a hacker.
Exactly.
And that puts
Milk,
it
eggs, and access to corporate credentials.
exactly. It puts it into perspective and makes it more real for for SMBs and people who are tuning in. Yeah. It's a great slide.
What else is even more interesting? So I don't know if any of you heard about the Move It breach, but that was a file transfer software that was breached.
Yep.
And CLOP, which was that ransomware gang, was so overwhelmed by the amount of data they got, they started publishing their data to the open internet.
Oh, wow. That's pretty wild. Yeah.
Yeah. So people didn't even have to go to the dark web to buy that.
Wow.
So how should you do this? How should you protect your business, your livelihood? Well, let's first talk about some real-time bombs, right? And you may have heard, hopefully you were able to attend the webinar with my colleague, Jim Peterson, and he addressed these as well. Employee turnover. When people leave, it's not just a loss of a warm body, it's loss of tribal knowledge. And IT professionals in 2022, 19% of them changed jobs. It's not, again, times have changed, right? Back in the old days, when you were hiring somebody, you wanted to see 10 or 20 years of staying power at one place, but the job market's just changed and people aren't staying in one place anymore. And I would bet, I did a search, but I wasn't able to find it. I started gathering some data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I would bet that number is even higher in cybersecurity.
Yeah. Yep.
Competition is really stiff for getting cyber talent.
Yep.
Your equipment, your end of life and your equipment and patching, right? Using end of life equipment is fortunately has decreased, but still we estimate that about 30% of equipment is underpatched. And that is really bad because
good,
remember those exploit vulnerabilities?
Yep.
This is how bad guys are getting in. And then documentation, again, those competing priorities you have as someone who's running a small to mid-sized business, right? You got to pick and choose where you spend your time and money. So, this particularly documentation, I don't think people really think, one-to-one would be a great place to help you document your processes and your policies and get that information done for you. So you don't have to worry about that.
Yep. It's one of the first things we provide.
That's right. That's where you should start.
Yep.
So you should bring in to help you. You should have a security operations center. So you may ask, what is a security operations center? Well, these are highly trained, highly skilled cyber individuals. And these are some of the high level things that they do. We could do a whole webinar just on this, right?
Yep.
Their goal is to shorten that time from when something's detected to detect something right away using advanced tools to stop a threat in its tracks as soon as possible. And by doing that, they're going to take things that are minor and keep them minor, like someone clicking on a phishing email, right? They're going to see that alert right away that something funny is going on. For example, if you click on a phishing email and that gives away access to your Office 365, bad guys are going to use that to exfiltrate data or to proliferate a bunch of email. And those are the things Security Operations Center in conjunction with an endpoint detection and response and or a security incident and event management system are going to use to see that kind of activity and know that something's happening, right?
Yep.
They're going to have that visibility of your IT assets and do that near-time real monitoring, because yes, they do have a lot of advanced tools, but how many people on your staff as a SMB have the know-how to run these tools and the training to run these tools?
Yep.
They've been in it a while, so they can, they are really good at analytics. You're looking at this information, even predicting what threat actors are going to do next. Like I said, I got into your email. What's the next thing I do? I exfiltrate data.
Yep.
Today when I get into your email, I'm also in your SharePoint and your OneDrive, right?
Yep.
So it could just be a huge file transfer, not have anything to do with your email at all, right?
Yep.
Letting, they stay abreast of cybersecurity stuff that's happening in the world. They know what the latest tactics, techniques, and procedures that bad guys are using. So they know what to look for. They know how to create rules that augment how a SIM or an EDR works, right? So they are really going to be your best asset for making informed and quick cybersecurity decisions, right?
Yep. And this is a great example too of how AI is being used for positive.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. They definitely use AI built into our tools, as well as, scripts that they and automation they create themselves. Yep. So how do they work? Well, they do proactive threat detection. They may see a pattern that doesn't necessarily match what we call a signature of a threat yet, right? And they know that we want to respond before what we call, before boom happens, right? Yep. Boom, when everything goes crazy.
Yep.
So they know how to look for those patterns and what to look for in the tools to alert them to those patterns. They also, even with AI and machine learning, they lean heavily on the human element to analyze. They just do. For looking at the outputs and creating new reports from these tools and taking and correlating even beyond the correlation capability of these advanced tools to look at data. And if you think about that, because it's an augmentation of both the human and automated methods, because you don't want to be looking through, a SOC analyst doesn't want to be looking through your log files either. They want to be using a tool to do that, because you would be surprised just how many and I think I have some stats later on.
Time consuming. Yeah.
How many logs things create. It's crazy. Yep. They actually understand, they share a lot of traits of a threat actor, but from the good side, right? They know how a threat actor behaves. So when they're investigating, they put on their threat actor hat and they're going to examine your measures and say, hey, if I was a threat actor, how would I have gotten in from here? Is it because I just harvested some passwords off the dark web and I was just, seeing what I could get into? Is there a new vulnerability? Am I seeing a 0-day? Am I seeing strange activity that I've never seen before? Right. And I'm telling you that you're going to want a SOC analyst in your corner, because a layperson is not going to see that in a 0-day attack, where a SOC analyst can and can. And I'm not saying that they will catch a 0-day every time before something happens. Unfortunately, just like with the tools, they're human. They're not going to, that's why we need that defense in depth. That's why we need this combination.
That layered approach.
Right. And they're going to be your first responders. They're going to do everything in their power to help you isolate infected systems, roll back and shut down whatever damage you can, and begin any of those initial efforts to get your network back to a pre-attack state. That is their job, and that is why you want one of these guys in your corner. And when I say guys, I mean everyone. We have some very capable females that are on that team as well. Very, very smart people. So that being said, what are the benefits? Well, you get that constant monitoring. How many SMBs have the bandwidth to run 24/7, 365? I mean, you're going to talk about burning out your employees, right?
Yep, exactly. Yeah. Yep.
You're just going to minimize the threat impact. Like I said, these are professionals that know what to look for. So many times they will catch things very early in the cycle and be able to mitigate and minimize any threat. They're experts, again, airtight security. They're experts in monitoring and triaging using advanced analytics. Am I saying that you're 100% covered if you do everything here? No, I'm not. But you're taking into account everything there is that you can do. And also we understand, every business, even if they're in the exact same vertical, you have different business objectives. You could have same business type, right? And have very different business objectives, very different risk tolerance, which is going to change what you're going to do. Cybersecurity is not one size fits all, right? So why not just build your own SOC, right? Well, overhead costs, not just the advanced tools, but technology moves at, the pace of, I don't know what, right? I don't even know what to compare it to.
Changing every day.
Right. The number of incoming alerts. If you think about there's a lot of noise with these cyber tools because we want to know if a bad guy is just knocking at your door. Right? We want to know if they're knocking. We want to stop them before the door gets opened, right?
Yep.
And not just that, we talked about this a little bit earlier, a small talent pool. There's not a plethora of security analysts out there just, in the employment line. With the way our work has changed with so much more remote work. I mean, we already had a lot in our industry, we already had a lot of remote workers, right? But with COVID, it made it even more palatable to have remote workers, right? And even beyond the SOC, what else can we as a team one-to-one do for you? Well, they have the power of a cyber research unit. So these are very specialized people within the SOC, who I told you are very highly credentialed and very smart people. And they actually create cybersecurity content and do threat hunting. They are paying attention to everything happening in the news. They actually are identifying new vulnerabilities, hopefully before bad guys, advise them, and then sharing all that information. They are creating automations, creating automated tools, changing actively the way the tools that we're using to defend you are working so that they are better and better equipped to help you stay ahead of the cyber threat actors. They do, like I said, they do research. That's their job. They research the threat actors. They research what we call their TTPs, or tactics, techniques, and procedures. What do they do? And even discover new threats. They create threat intelligence. Threat intelligence is a great way to protect your environment through your SIM and through your EDR. They monitor a lot of sites like ransom leak sites and malicious botnets, and utilize data from the same tools that are protecting you to see where those trends are headed. And then they publish information on that to help you. Again, the threat hunting, which is all part of the research and the intelligence, hunting for new threats. It involves building visualizations to highlight trends and patterns. It involves both manual and automated processes to identify new indicators of compromise, or testing new methods of even exploiting vulnerabilities, things like that. And then the other thing they do, which is a lot of fun, where even those of you on this call can get involved, is they do plan capture the flag activities where they can create scenarios, real looking scenarios. As a matter of fact, a few years ago, they created such a real looking scenario that some other security researchers thought it was a real threat. So that was fun. And that's a way to dip your toes into cybersecurity and get firsthand knowledge of how these things work. And if you ever find a CTF to compete in or just observe, I highly encourage that. So these are some of the numbers I was talking about. This is why we should partner to protect your business, that 24/7 by 365 coverage. We're monitoring over 4.6 endpoints. So we're seeing what's happening in that SMB market, responding to over 10,000, 10,000, I wish, 10 million plus threats. And we see over the corpus of data over those endpoints, and you could do a little math here to figure out, about how many endpoints or events per second it would be for you, but over a million events per second, some which may be threats or breaches and some which just may be someone knocking on the door. And I wanted to share this. Right now, you're backed by over 160 individuals that are highly trained, and these are some of the certifications that they have. And while some of these, we could argue, some of the ones maybe I have, we could argue that, they're just a test of how good you take a test. I can assure you this GCIA, GSLC, this GWAPT, all of these are not those kind of tests. These are multi-day scenario-based tests. You have to be very smart to even understand what's going on in order to pass these tests. They are highly trained. And you have to consider that if you want to set up your own SOC. You're not going to attract the right talent if you're not going to put the budget into training them and keeping their certifications up to date. Even something like the CISSP is I don't know, what is that running nowadays? It's quite a few thousand to get trained and get and take your test and everything. Right? And then you have to consider the cost of industry and regulation compliance. Are you going to get SOC 2 certified? That has very specific attestations about how data is protected. Do you have clients who are required to comply with some third-party compliance standard? HIPAA, PCI. Are you going to invest the time, talent, and treasure to be involved in the U.S. Privacy Shield network with some of our European partners? And and we are invested as a team, including one-to-one, in making sure that even though in the US we're not under GDPR, that we are paying attention to these privacy regulations, and they are founding principles of everything we're doing to support the security and privacy of our clients and their clients.
Yep, another great call out.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so let's just do some math real quick. So just really simple, example. So let's say, for instance, that you have about 10 devices you need monitored, and that costs about $30 per month to monitor those devices. And then initially, if you look at the ConnectWise website, it'll say it's about 80K. Well, I did my research and it's about 120K is the median salary for a SOC analyst. I think it's 119 or 120, and I just rounded it for simplicity. And then let's just consider that managed detection and response, which includes your endpoint detection and response and your SOC is about $3 per device. And we'll do some magical math right here. And I say magical because I'm not going to do that on the fly for you. And some of this isn't even considering, honestly, some of that training and certification for your organization, as well as a training and certification for your staff. And this is what it looks like. Right. What it's going to cost for you to do it yourself, and what it's going to cost for you to have it managed or done for you. And even beyond the cost, the other reason you should use IT consulting services is we're going to give you access to expertise. We're going to give you flexibility and scalability. If you have a special project come in for a client, are you going to hire and fire staff on the fly? I mean, what a way to get a bad reputation in your industry right away, right?
Another sort of reputational damage.
Yeah. But we can augment that for you. That 24/7, again, 365. I know I've said it a bunch, but that is, to me, that is one of the biggest factors, because you can't burn out your staff. Reduce downtime, because you're going to have those professionals who are going to see those indicators of something happening before something happens.
Yep.
It's going to allow you to focus on your core business. Do you really want to focus on cybersecurity? Because I'm here to tell you it's a full-time job. And access to the latest technology. We are changing the way things work and happen on the back end all the time. Do you have the capacity or the skill set to constantly rip and replace or augment that technology to make sure you're using the latest and greatest?
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's massive. Yep.
Yeah. And then honestly, talk with one-to-one. It's not going to cost you anything to have a conversation and talk about your business objectives, your risk tolerance, and your maturity level as an organization. Talk to them about your OML, do an OML assessment so you can judge your maturity level, figure out a roadmap, figure out what works best for you. And with that, awesome. Thank you for having me. This has been great. Do you have any follow-up questions you think there, Chuck?
Well, I think so. I'll probably have some follow-up questions after we send this out, but the one thing that I really wanted to touch base and return to was like just how much value a SOC really provides when you take a look at the cost of what you could potentially pay out in ransom versus what you're going to be paying on a monthly basis to prevent that from happening.
It's a fraction.
Yeah. Yep.
It's a fraction.
Yeah. It's so, and it's very, very important to have something like that in place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
And not just that, when you pay a ransom, this is my personal opinion, so don't hold this against anyone else, but you really shouldn't pay a ransom because you're really, if you've ever been to the dark web, you're funding a lot of bad stuff. Yep. Not only you're funding the creation of new malware and new malware research by the bad guys, you're also funding drug trafficking, human trafficking, terrorism, all kinds of really bad stuff that you probably don't want to be a part of.
Don't want to be a part of. Yeah, exactly. That's another great call out. Yeah. Yeah, Natalie, this was incredible. A lot of really great information in here, and I truly appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. Thank you. Hope everyone has a great rest of their day, a great rest of their week. Take care.
Thanks. You too, Natalie. Be well. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.